This episode of the Conversation Podcast is brought to you by Uniweb.com, your one-stop solution for cutting-edge software development and AI-driven technology. If you're looking to take your business to the next level with innovative digital solutions, Uniweb has got you covered. Today, we have an incredible guest, Kenin M. Spivak. He's a top executive, entrepreneur, financier, author, and attorney with a career that spans Hollywood, global business, and finance. Kenin has worked at the highest levels of MGM UA, Patron Tequila, John Paul Mitchell Systems, and the MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas, where he played a role in shaping the empire built by the legendary Kirk Kerkorian, the visionary behind modern Las Vegas and one of the most powerful figures in entertainment and business. In Hollywood, Kenin has been involved in some of the most iconic films ever made, including Oscar-winning classics like Rain Man, Rocky, and The Sandlot, and many more. Has seen firsthand how the industry works, both in front of the camera and behind the scenes. Beyond entertainment, he's a finance and business strategist running SMI Group, a company that helps build businesses worldwide, including a fully licensed SEC registered investment bank. He's also an author with books like The Jurassic Conspiracy and Trainwreck. Today, we'll hear behind-the-scenes stories, business insights from the top, and lessons from working with industry giants like Kirk Kerkorian and more. So sit back, turn up the volume, and let's get started. Mr. Kenin Spivak, how are you?
I am great, Mr. Steven Seffer.
I have not seen you in a few years, huh?
It's true. It's true, but you look the same. You look like you've just been to the gym.
It's called good creams at night, the soothing things that help you.
Aloe. I use it twice a day, aloe, to try to stave off the effects of aging.
I have to say, I lost track of everything you've done over the period of time. I've known you for years, obviously. And thank you for coming on the podcast, first of all.
Well, thank you. I just think it's just crazy and great that you have a podcast.
Well, the subject is you, but I'll tell you why. I mean, COVID and two strikes, I got to keep the creative juices flowing. So I'm telling human stories, and I love telling human stories. And you were on top of my list when I started doing this. I said, I got to get Kenin on here, just because all the things you've done. So Kenin, for people who don't know you, just give me a summary from the start to wherever you want to go, and then I'll just jump in organically.
Okay, so for the 100% of your audience that doesn't know me, as opposed to just the sum, it all started in a 5,000-watt radio station. No, you see, your audience don't even know what that is. It's from the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Ted Knight said that in a speech. He won an Emmy Award, and he got up and he said it all started in a 5,000-watt radio station. Yes. All right. Well, it started for me in Brooklyn. I was actually born in Manhattan in Doctors Hospital, which was famous for a while because in all those old Doris Day Rock Hudson movies, people were always being born in Doctors Hospital. So I started out at the top in Doctors Hospital, but then I was brought up in Brooklyn, which was not in the Doris Day Rock Hudson movies. I went to James Madison High School, where Chuck Schumer went there, Judge Judy went there, Bernie Sanders went there, Norm Coleman. There was a time when there were 3 United States senators from 3 different states. Norm Coleman from Minnesota, he was before Al Franken, Bernie Sanders from Vermont, and Chuck Schumer from New York had all gone to James Madison High School.
That's amazing.
So I went to James Madison High School, then I went to Columbia. I went to Columbia for Columbia College, Columbia Law School, Columbia Business School, because as a good Jewish boy from Brooklyn, I needed to have lots of degrees. And so I did that. Then I was an entertainment attorney. I'm going to go fast. So I can go back to anything you want. Then I was an entertainment attorney in Los Angeles. I moved to Los Angeles. And after that, I moved back to New York, where I was an entertainment attorney. Then I went to Merrill Lynch Investment Banking, where I was an entertainment and media investment banker and did some really good stuff. We started one of the nation's biggest broadcast groups. We owned cable systems and radio stations, some a lot bigger than 5,000 watts. and TV stations. And I was on the board of that, and we bought and sold things. And we did these gigantic leverage buyout fund, not for media. That was just in general. It was actually a good time. I left there to go become the number two person to the chief operating officer of MGM UA, the major film studio. A billionaire by the name of Kirk Kerkorian brought
Of
me in,
course.
tried to turn the studio around. After a few years, we sold that to a man named Giancarlo Peretti, who ended up spending quite a few years in federal penitentiary. That's another story. But as a result of the MGM UA sale, he went to federal penitentiary. So I left
Wow.
that. I joined Chris Blackwell. Chris Blackwell was a big record mogul. He found U2. He found Melissa Etheridge. He found all sorts of people. And he had sold his record company to Polygram, but he still owned his film and movie company, Island Pictures.
Oh yeah.
Island Pictures made Kiss of the Spider Woman and all sorts of things. So I became the CEO of the movie division, not the record company, which was owned by Polygram, but the movie TV division. We made lots of movies. The movie we made that to this day, when I was at MGM UA, I was involved in making Rain Man
Wow.
and Fish Called Wanda and Rambo and Rocky and all sorts of movies. But at Island World, we made The Sandlot. And to this day, more guys, if I get into this, want to talk about The Sandlot than any other movie I was ever involved in. And we made that at Island World. Uh, Left Island World, became the vice chairman of John Paul Mitchell Systems, the hair care company. I had more hair then. Uh, I became vice chairman of John Paul Mitchell Systems. I became chairman and CEO of all sorts of other companies. I had a book publishing company for a while with a very interesting man we should talk about named Michael Weiner, who unfortunately had passed away. I had a book publishing company. I had that company. I started a wireless technology company, which I eventually sold. So several years ago, I sold a lot of these businesses and I started a small boutique investment bank, which I still have. I'm on a bunch of boards of different companies. I own pieces in different companies. I sometimes just give advice on things I don't own any part of. I think that's called cash flow. Ownership interests. I write
Uh,
a lot, primarily for conservative publications like National Review and Real Clear Politics and Real Clear Policy. And I moderate panels and I go around the country and I do political things, which I know is not really the what your audience cares.
yeah.
But so that sort of fills in the rest. That's like my hobby, if you will. Before I went to Merrill Lynch, I was the chief operating officer of a network television company based in New York. It was the number one network television supplier in New York. That would make it like number 90 in LA, but it was number one in New York. And we made lots of really successful miniseries. And one of the miniseries we made starred Charlton Heston. So way back in his heyday, I got to meet Charlton Heston and all sorts of other great. Joan Collins was in one of our miniseries and all sorts of great people. So that was actually a
Oh.
lot of fun too.
Oh my God, Kenin, you're blowing away my mind. I don't know too many people who have accomplished as much as you have. I mean, it's pretty darn impressive. Starting from, I mean, there's so much to unpack here. So if you don't mind, I'm going to kind of go through it and we can talk about it. Um, are you a single child?
No, I have a brother and a sister who are twins.
Oh,
We're younger than
wow.
me. We're younger than me.
Are they in East Coast? Are they
One lives in Long Island, and the other lives near Duke University in North Carolina.
unbelievable? You know, it is very clear that you have such a tenacity for success. What drives you?
Growing up middle class in Brooklyn, not affluent. I didn't like being only middle class, and I mean, real middle class. My parents were educated, so we were not blue collar. We were white collar middle class. Not that that's any better or worse, but that's just what we were. Um, I grew up back in the time of Saturday Night Fever, and the goal was to get out of Brooklyn. And nowadays, a lot of people move to Brooklyn. When I grew up, Brooklyn was the place you wanted to leave. And I think that's really what motivated me. I also loved the entertainment industry. I had this goal as a kid. Well, my first goal was I wanted to be captain of a submarine. Then my vision went, so I couldn't be captain of a submarine anymore. But I had and have every submarine book ever made. I've been on nuclear powered submarines. I
Oh,
actually once
wow.
had the opportunity, and I know this is not the real word that's used by submariners, but I got to drive the submarine. There was a person standing over my shoulder to make sure I didn't crash the submarine, but I did drive. Tim Allen was with, it was a small group of us. Tim Allen was on that trip.
Oh my
I
God.
did get to drive a Los Angeles class nuclear attack submarine. So I started out, I wanted to be a submarine captain. My vision went, that was the end of that dream. So I next decided I wanted to be the president of CBS, because that's sort of like driving a submarine. I didn't get ever to be the president of CBS, but I got to be the president of MGM UA. It's
Oh,
not
wow.
exactly the same, but it was close enough.
Oh my God. Listen, I read Kirk Kerkorian's book. I was actually infatuated with him. I didn't know you were part of his world. I had no idea. How was it when, and then we're going to jump around a little bit because you've
Mhm.
laid out so much work and so much stuff to talk about. How did he approach you? How did you get involved with MGM, and specifically what kind of person was Kirk Kerkorian just as a person?
First, Kerkorian was great, so I'll come back to that. When I was at Merrill Lynch Investment Banking, we had an M&A, merger and acquisition client, well, coincidentally, Polygraph. I mean, coincidental to the Chris Blackwell sale, but that has nothing to do with each other. We had an M&A client, Polygram, which wanted to look at buying MGM UA, which at the time was up for sale. In meeting with Kirk and Kirk senior people, they ended up concluding that my analysis of MGM UA's business was better than their own, that
Wow.
my financial projections were better than their own financial projections, that my insight into some aspects of their business was better than their own insight on some aspects of their business. I mean, I don't want to go overboard here. Polygram decided not to pursue MGM UA. And in fact, that entire effort to sell MGM UA failed. Kirk then went to Peter Ueberroth. Peter Ueberroth had run the Olympics. He was at the time, one of the most famous business people in the US. And he approached Ueberroth and he wanted Ueberroth to be the CEO. And he said to Ueberroth, if you accept this job, I have someone who absolutely should be your number two, your right hand man. And he introduced me to Peter Ueberroth. And Ueberroth
Wow.
met me and said, oh, I love this guy. It's great. I'll come be the CEO. Kenin can come be the COO. And Peter then withdrew.
Oh, wow.
And so Kirk said to me, well, let's just wait and see because I have to make sure the CEO will want you. So now I'm going to make a much longer story short. Kirk had never met my boss at MGM UA, who was a man named Jeff Barbakow. Jeff Barbakow had done some entertainment work, but he was actually a bigger deal in healthcare and other aspects of investment banking. But he knew a lot of actors and producers and writers. He was a very affluent person who lived in Beverly Hills. He was investors in different deals with them. And they called him in. And Kirk offered Jeff, in due course, the job as CEO of MGM UA and said to Jeff, well, I'd like you to bring Kenin with you. And Jeff said, well, of course. He works for me at MGM UA. So people outside thought that Jeff was hired and then brought me in with him. And I mean, he did, but that's not really how it happened. It's that I had been hired first. My hiring was put on hold. Jeff came in and said, of course. And that's how I ended up going to MGM UA. And I reported to Jeff, but I also reported directly to Kirk. I worked with Kirk every day. And Kirk and I developed a fantastic relationship. Kirk could be prickly, Kirk could be difficult, but Kirk was a straight shooter. Kirk only had a junior high school degree, but he had a common sense and an ability to read people that was second to none. When we sold MGM UA, and frankly, Jeff as CEO made a lot more money than me. Kirk went to Jeff and said, Jeff, that's not fair. It's fair that you earn more than Kenin, but it's not fair you earn that much more than Kenin. You should actually give some of what you earn to Kenin. Now, Kirk didn't offer to give some of what he earned to me, but he did go to Jeff and say, Kenin made X, you made Y. That ratio is out of whack because Kenin really, well, actually, I did negotiate the sale and I ran the company. So Jeff said whatever he said to Kirk, but did not think that it was productive to give me part of what he earned. But for the rest of his life, Kirk was my supporter. Kirk would refer me to opportunities. I would sometimes meet people who worked for Kirk who I didn't know very well. They instantly knew who I was. When Kirk died, by coincidence, I ran into one of Kirk's children, and I was with someone who knew Kirk's daughter's husband. And so my name got said, and his daughter, who I had met, it was a long, long time ago, actually turned to me and said, Kenin, Spivak, my dad loved you.
Oh, wow.
And Kirk backed me years later. I made a bid to buy MGM UA from, it was then Sony owned it. And Kirk backed my bid. He was going to invest in my bid without any control. So the answer is, I really liked working for Kirk. I really admired and respected Kirk. I'll give you one other Kirk Kerkorian story. All right. So a few years after I left MGM UA, at the time I was working with Chris Blackwell, Kirk had some questions and he flew me to Monaco and put me up on his gigantic yacht. I think it was actually in Saint-Tropez is where the yacht was docked, which is right near Monaco. And his then girlfriend, who was a world-renowned tennis player, it's the girlfriend who at one point alleged that she'd had a child with Kirk, but they then figured out it wasn't with Kirk, it was with someone else. We were all on this ship and spent 2 days, and I did whatever business I did with Kirk was on the ship. And his then girlfriend came to me and said, you know, some people think I'm with Kirk only for his money. That's probably because she was with Kirk. I don't know about only for his money, but in part for his money. And she was trying to convince me to tell Kirk what a good person she was. Now, I'd never met her before. The only thing she knew about me was I was some guy that worked with Kirk. You know, right? So I was a Kirk person. I don't know why she thought that I wouldn't just go to Kirk and say that she'd come to me. Now, no, I didn't actually do that. There was no point to getting in the middle of their relationship.
That would be funny.
You know, they stayed together for a few years, eventually broke up. I know Kirk stayed friendly with her for the rest of his life because he was that type of person. But that, to me, was one of the weirdest of my Kirk stories. Kirk's girlfriend.
You know, it's funny you say this to me because in the book I read about her and the character you're explaining goes it's at par with what the book was saying about that. So yeah, there's an unworthy. But you know, sometimes people that are so successful, like Kirk Kerkorian, like yourself, you know, sometimes it's hard to be vulnerable. And sometimes when you find that individual and something clicks, you know, it seems like you want to be vulnerable because you can't always have your guards up. Am I right?
Right, you're right.
Whether it's their significant other or a friend or that. So it seems like Kirk Kerkorian, talking about him in this case, and the information that I read in the book was that, you know, after a while, I mean, you can't keep having your guards up there. How do you maneuver in the business world between friendship and business associates?
Yeah, that's a good question. And one thing I would say, that girlfriend that Kirk had, she clearly did like Kirk. I mean, I think she probably also liked Kirk for his money. And putting aside the conversation, they were together for a long time. She obviously was good to him and they had a good relationship. This thing with the kid at the end that I was not involved in, I think, messed things up. And it wasn't Kirk's kid. Okay, so I do business with a lot of friends. I do business with very close friends. I do business with not as close friends. A lot of my friends became my friends because of business. All right, so I have a funny story on a friend. When I was at MGM UA, we had a law firm. It was Kirk Kerkorian's law firm. And the lead, it's all such a small world. The lead lawyer in that firm was Terry Christensen. Terry Christensen was later convicted of spying on this girlfriend of Kirk through Anthony Pellicano, a private detective. So, if you will, it's all one small, funny world. But Terry Christensen had an attorney who worked for him. At the time, his rank was associate, and law firms are associates and partners. And we would ask, I in particular would ask Terry questions, and Terry would bend over to his associate, his name is Eric, and ask Eric questions, and then Terry would give us answers. And this kept happening. And I eventually said, Terry, if you're going to ask Eric the answer to my question, why don't we just let Eric answer my question? And from then on, Eric would answer those questions that Eric was answering anyway, and Terry would answer those questions that Terry was answering anyway. And that is how Eric became my friend. And Eric has ever since then been my closest friend. So, that was a business friendship mix. And I think the answer is the following. The tough one is confidentiality. There are times when you really do have to maintain confidentiality, and that includes when talking to your friends. But if you don't have a confidentiality issue, and I'm big on disclosure. So if I'm doing business with someone else and I choose to do business with a friend, and I do business with friends, and many of my friends are very capable. Many of my friends have become very successful. Many of my friends are the people you'd want to do business with. And if there's two people, either of whom are more or less comparable in quality, I'd rather do business with my friend because they're my friend. And as long as I disclose to someone else that I brought in someone who's my friend, I have no compunction about doing business with my friend. I see no reason not to do business with my friend, and I do lots of business with my friends. When we get to the part where my friend says, all right, I want $10, and if it wasn't my friend, I'd be saying, well, I'll pay you $5. Does my friend end up getting more than 5, but less than 10 because he's my friend? Maybe. Do I end up maybe getting a little bit harder work from my friend, or a little bit more focus than his other, I don't want to use the word client, because it may not be a client relationship, but business colleagues? I think I do, and the same in reverse. And that's one of the things, when you read about lawsuits, when you read that someone was sued and they say they paid their friend an extra dollar, and you read about things like that all the time. What gets missed in those lawsuits, now the lawyers know this, it's part of the game, they have to pretend they don't. But the jurors may not know this because they're not really in that world. The judge may or may not know this depending upon where they came from before they became a judge. But when you maybe do pay your friend an extra dollar, unless you're a bad person, unless it really is a put-up job, your friend is also giving you $1 or $1.50 more effort, work, focus, and caring about doing an absolute terrific job. So it's a two-way street. And as I say, the public doesn't often see that it's a two-way street, but it is. In a big company, in the biggest companies where I was the boss were not giant companies. MGM UA was not Time Warner. It would have been a mere division of Time Warner, for example. I worked at Merrill Lynch, which was a giant company, but I wasn't running Merrill Lynch. I was an officer in the investment banking division. I actually, at the time, I was 5 ranks above the lowest ranking person in the division and 5 ranks below the CEO of Merrill Lynch. But that was a giant company. But I'm just saying, in all of these companies, the people in the company understood this. So if I went to my boss at Merrill Lynch and said, I'm going to hire X to be our lawyer, he didn't really particularly ask, well, are you paying him the right amount per hour? He was fine. I disclosed he was my friend so that he could mark it down someplace so that no one later could get him in trouble. But business runs on doing business with at least acquaintances. Why would you want to do business with someone you don't know anything about, that you don't know might not have your best interests at heart? might cheat you, might not be very good. You want to do business with people who at least are your acquaintances.
Yeah. Yeah, no, listen, you're unpacking some really great insight. You know what I'm realizing, Kenan? I think I want you here more than once. You got a lot of information on, man. Seriously. I mean, you covered from law school all the way down to so many different businesses. I mean, it's quite fascinating. I'm gonna rewind the tape when we done with this and look at the different aspects, and I'll email you some information. I mean, there's so much going on, but I noticed that you got into doing a lot of writing books, a lot of books.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at the list of the books that you shared with me, and I'm curious, why did you pick those books, first of all? What intrigued you to get involved in those, and how much were you involved from the scratch to the beginning to the end? How did that go?
Okay. They're an eclectic group of books of different genre, and each one has its own reason why I got involved. There is a fiction book called The Karasik Conspiracy. It wasn't a New York Times bestseller, but it was an Amazon bestseller. It did okay. So I had a girlfriend who had a friend whose name was Julie Kristen, and Julie was a writer. She'd written books before. She'd written all sorts of things before. Julie asked for my help to make a deal with a man named Michael Weiner, who I mentioned way earlier on in a different context,
Yeah.
to help her do a deal with Michael Weiner. Michael Weiner had an idea. He was getting funding from the pharmaceutical industry to write a book that was going to have, if you will, a secret theme that was critical of certain anti-pharmaceutical industry critics. And so Julie was going to write this book, and she started writing it. And I would give her comments on it. I'd written lots of things, but not books. And I gave her comments on it. And then the pharmaceutical industry was their lobbying group. It pulled out. Michael Weiner said, fuck them. We're now going to completely switch the orientation of the book. And, we're going to align it with the critics, and we're going to go after them. And
I love it.
Julie wasn't that comfortable with this switch in the book. And I said, all right, fine, I'll help you write the book. Okay, by the time we're done, I had written almost the entire book. There were a couple of scenes that Julie wrote, but I ended up, other than 2 chapters, pretty much wrote the book. There were 2 chapters that were primarily Julie, and the other chapters were either entirely me or primarily me. I mean, Julie did have input to some of the other chapters. So it was co-written, but in the end, I wrote more. And then we did a thing where, I don't remember now exactly how it is. I think on the cover, maybe it says written by Julie and Kenin, but you open the first page of the book, and it's written by Kenin and Julie. And on the spine of the book, it's one way, on the other thing is the other way. So, but that's fine, that's fair. So we kept going back and forth. We did what was then called satellite radio publicity tour, which means you sit at home, you talk on your phone to different radio stations, and only I did the satellite radio tour because it got political. We did talk about the whole story with the pharmaceutical industry. We did not keep any of it secret.
Wow.
And Julie, who's a very good person, wasn't comfortable being in attack mode. So I solely did the satellite radio tour. Some was on TV, most was on radio. At the time, radio was a big deal. You didn't have to be on podcasts, which really is the radio or the TV of today.
It is. It is. It is.
So the book ended up doing reasonably well. And that's how I got involved in that book. So the funny thing is, by doing that book, I got to know Michael Weiner, and I ended up investing in the company. And Michael Weiner and I ended up each owning roughly 50% of the company. I became chairman, and he was still running the company.
What company is this?
It was called Phoenix Books.
Got it.
Phoenix Books. And so Michael Weiner, the Michael Weiner story, then I'll come back to this. Michael Weiner was the second person to wrestle Sirhan to the ground after he assassinated Robert Kennedy. The first person was Rosey Grier, who I used to know really well. You haven't lived till you've been on a private jet opposite Rosey Grier with a little table between you with your knees interlocking. And Rosey Grier was a football player. He was very big. It was very uncomfortable. But so I knew Rosey Grier. And then the second person who wrestled Sirhan to the ground was Michael Weiner. And Michael Weiner was a really well-known sort of liberal Democrat. Through Michael, I met Gloria Allred. I met the people from KISS. I met a lot of people. The number one Super Bowl party in LA at the time was Michael Weiner's annual Super Bowl party, which I co-hosted a couple of years because I ended up owning the company with Michael. And again, I was politically conservative. Michael was politically quite liberal. It was a great relationship. Michael Weiner's best friend was Larry King. Larry King, again, by coincidence, ended up buying the house across the street from me. And Larry, and then I started getting invited to all of Larry King's breakfasts at Natanyahou's because Larry would walk past my house and say, come along. It's all this very small world stuff. So I met Michael Weiner because I helped him with Julie on this book. I ended up investing in the company, owning half the company. Again, this goes to friends and other things. Eventually, Michael and I sold the company. Who did we sell the company to? A billionaire who had become Julie Christensen's boyfriend, and later on her husband.
Wow.
He was a billionaire. He owned something called West's Law, which is those hardcover books you see behind lawyers all the time. Julie Christensen's husband, Pierre Opperman, and Prince were the two famous people in Minneapolis. And Pierre decided that he wanted to buy the company. So we sold the company to Pierre. So again, it's all about how do you not do business with friends? And you see how it's all
my God.
around and who it is. So that's why I wrote that book. Another book I wrote.
But before you go, I want to ask you a question because there's some stuff nuggets that came at me. I know you're very analytical when it comes to politics, when it comes to law, when it comes to business deals. You wrote a creative book. That's a different part of your brain. How did you do that for yourself?
Okay, yes. And I'm going to tell you about another book that was the same thing. I am never going to be a great poet. I am never, ever going to write poetry that anyone will read. The closest I could come is Ogden Nash, Candy Dandy, Licorice Quicker. Maybe I could come up with something like that. But real poetry, Robert Frost, not me. Second, I'm never going to write those award-winning books that are just so beautiful, that are just so emotive, that plumb the depths of the human spirit. I mean, it's about all I can do to say the phrase, plumb the depths of the human spirit. But a thriller is an analytic book. I mean, at the extreme, the original Tom Clancy books, all these Tom Clancy books now weren't written by Tom Clancy. But go back and look at Tom Clancy's original books. They were very analytic. A lot of spy novels are very analytic. I mean, they're not the same as a legal brief, but they are analytic. A lot of the people who write those books, believe it or not, are nuclear scientists or have engineering degrees. Not the people who write beautiful drama, not the people who, if it was a film or making an independent film, it's the people who are making what used to be Kenin movies, Urim Globus movies. It's that type of people. So it does come a little bit from that part of the brain, but I am creative. I've given notes that were used to many movies. Prior to writing this book, the other book I'd written was a business encyclopedia where I was called the editor, but I'd written lots of the entries in the business encyclopedia, which was a Warner book, was a successful book, but that was encyclopedia.
It's crazy, man.
Right. Listen, even in some of my articles, although it doesn't always go well, I sometimes use sarcasm. One of the things I've noticed, and again, I don't want to get political, but one of the problems that Donald Trump has is sometimes when he speaks, actually often when he speaks, he uses sarcasm. And either people don't realize that it's sarcasm, and then they start attacking him for what he says. Because if you don't realize it's sarcasm, it's
Could be offensive.
worthy of being attacked, no matter what political perspective you have. And some realize it's sarcasm, but attack them anyway because it's fun to pretend you don't think it's sarcasm. Right. So in my writing, I sometimes use sarcasm, and I discover that people misunderstand it. I mean, I'm going to give you, and I know I'm really off course here. Let me give you an example of something that went totally awry just a few weeks ago. Mark Cuban was on The View, and Mark Cuban, when on The View, said that Donald Trump is unwilling to work with intelligent women. He surrounds himself with stupid women. So lots of women around Donald Trump who were very smart got offended, and it became a joke about Mark Cuban and Donald Trump, because whatever you want to attack Donald Trump for, it wouldn't be a lack of smart women around him. And I wrote this article, and I was talking about women. It really wasn't Donald Trump per se, but I was talking about women. And then I referred to a woman that was doing something with Donald Trump, and I said, another really smart woman, blah, 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 said. So there's a very smart woman, Yale Law graduate, extremely well-known, a woman named Heather McDonald. Heather McDonald's on news shows all the time. She's at Manhattan Institute. I mean, she's talking about political stuff. She's very well-known, incredibly bright. She emailed me to complain. She said, I really liked your article, but what was this nonsense about smart women? And I was surprised that she didn't know what I was talking. She didn't. But anyway, when it was all done, it was sort of one of the things where she said, like Emily Latella back in Saturday Night Live, it was, all right, never mind. But see, that's the risk of using sarcasm, right? That not everyone knows it's sarcasm.
Yes, yes.
I was just going to say, though, in a lot of my writings, my analytic writings, I do have some humor and some sarcasm. So it a little bit feeds back into doing the Kerosene conspiracy.
Interesting.
I can tell you the next book I did was, we had a writer. Again, this is how books are really made. This is like you're inside the sausage factory.
Yeah.
We were publishing a book at Phoenix that was an autobiography of Anna Nicole Smith's estranged sister. Not Anna Nicole Smith, her estranged sister. At the time, everyone knew she had a sister, but they hadn't spoken in 8 years with her. And we were not doing the Anna Nicole Smith autobiography. We were doing the estranged sister autobiography, because that's the kind of company we were. And and Anna Nicole, and we had a woman who worked for us who was ghostwriting for Anna Nicole Smith's sister. The book initially was going to have co-credit. It's going to be the sister and our writer. Anna Nicole Smith dies. And we realized that we need to get our book finished and published immediately. The ghostwriter just wasn't going to be able to get it done fast enough. And she wasn't the right person to refocus the book the way we wanted it focused, given this death. So I stepped in and wrote, I don't know, a third to a half of the Anna Nicole's, not more than half. I mean, somewhere between a third and a half, I rewrote the Anna Nicole Smith's estranged sister autobiography, ghostwritten by the woman who worked for us. And we got it published within a few weeks. And on that one, I didn't do the TV. The TV was done by...
Is your name on it as an author?
No, but I was the publisher, so I own whatever, say 50% of the company. So it wasn't important to get my name on it. Ultimately, we did talk about the fact that I wrote a lot of the book, and it's not a secret that I wrote a lot of the book, but I didn't do the TV or the radio on that. And the woman who worked for us, the ghostwriter, did some of that. But she wrote more of it than I did, because if I'm a third to a half, then she's a half to two thirds.
Sure.
But that's another book that I had an awful lot to do with writing, and that was definitely creative writing. And there I was writing in the voice of a woman.
How did you, I mean, look, let's talk about writing for a second here. You know, like when I just flipped one of my screenplays into a novel. It's actually a funny story, but it's a personal story, and I turned it from 20,000 words to 75,000 words, and it became a novel because I wanted to get it out there. It's actually called The Storyteller, based on this podcast. But what's interesting to me is that how do you your mindset when you get into doing a book. Each book from where you Kenin Spivak, it seems to me it's a happenstance or an opportunity, and you just have the skill set to execute. Is that pretty close to what we're talking about?
The answer is I'm pretty good at knowing the type of writing that I'm good at and bad at. And I can give notes to, I can give direction to what a story should be about, the beats, if you will, of a story, whether it's a screenplay or a book, for many, many different genres. There are many, many authors, whether it's screenplay writers, teleplay writers, book authors, where I know I've been helpful to them in developing their story. I mean, that's what a book editor does at Simon and Schuster. And I can do that, and I can do that in a pretty broad range of genre. I have a pretty good sense of what a lot of people are interested in. I have a pretty good sense of what is understandable to people. So that's very broad. I'm not saying it's all genre. It would not be the genre of nuclear physics. Uh, it would not be poetry, but it's a pretty broad range of genre.
Is that a learned skill or is that a instinctive skill?
I think it's a combination of an instinctive skill. It's the fact that I grew up middle class in Brooklyn. I didn't grow up rich in Newport, Rhode Island, or wherever it might be. I may be fortunate enough that I'm now affluent, but I have fairly pedestrian, commonplace, everyman taste in most things. I'm not going to say everything, and I'm sure I've changed over the years, but in most things. And some of it is that the creative projects I was involved in initially were very much targeting average people and average tastes. When I was at Highgate, we made a lot of after school specials, which were these 1 hour specials on CBS and ABC. They were meant for school kids. They were on at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They had a moral message, but they were very much entertaining and entertainment. We made them with people who, in some cases, were already well known then and became even bigger stars later. Some of our directors and producers were successful then and became even more so later. Others were earlier on in their careers, a mixture. And so that's learned. That's not instinctive, that's learned. And I just think it's who I am. And I think that also I was in a position from fairly early in my career where people would at least pretend to listen to my notes. And then if they saw that they agreed with them, they would take them and I would learn what worked and didn't work. So I think it's a combination of the two. So that's a pretty broad range of genre. Then there are the ones that I can edit. That means when you edit, you actually write, and your writing shows up in the final work product, but you didn't conceive of the thought in the paragraph. You figured out how to express it better. I mean, look, take the extreme. Now, this is really proofreading or proofwriting. This is not really editing. This is where someone has a dangling participle or they have a split infinitive, right? That's proofreading. You're changing the wording, but it's proofreading. The step above proofreading, which is copy editing and really editing, you're writing it a different way, but you're still trying to keep to the meaning of the original author. So that I can do in almost any genre, and I can do it in the voice of the author. You go from there to where I'm really the writer. And as I said, that gets narrower, but I know where I'm good or not good at
Can I
doing it.
ask you a question?
Yeah.
You said something quite interesting to me right now. You said I can do it in the voice of the author. That's a chameleon skill set. What do you mean? So just to say, you said you wrote in the voice of a woman, for example, in your last book.
Mhm.
I know the process of writing. I've been doing it for 20 plus years. Different characters, different genres. But how do you do it? That's quite interesting because you're taking a material that someone else wrote and then you adapt their voice and then you continue wrapping it up. How does that
So
work for you?
I'm going to say it's probably two aspects to this. One is going to be instinctive, whatever it is, whatever's inside of me. The other is I'm not sufficiently narcissistic. I'm sure I'm narcissistic, but I'm not sufficiently narcissistic that I don't listen, that I don't hear what other people are saying, that I don't read what other people are saying, and that I can't understand what they're saying, and if it's appropriate, further their goal. So, we've talked a little bit about political stuff. So I have worked with many, many people whose politics differ from mine, but I'm not in those situations. I'm not there to advance my politics. I'm there to advance their project, or in some cases, more like a PR person than other things. I've done marketing for people, and I'm there to advance what they're doing. Now, if what they are trying to advance was in some cases a project or a position I didn't share, it didn't mean that they weren't happy that I actually helped them advance their project or their idea. And, some people might say, well, if you don't agree with someone, why would you even want to help them achieve their goal? Okay, so it's a very simple answer. If their goal is so anathema to me that their achieving it would, to me, be unimaginable. Their goal is they want to kill all people above 6 feet tall. Then I should just resign and not help them achieve their goal. If their goal is that they want blue wallpaper, but I really prefer yellow, either they're paying me to help them achieve blue wallpaper, and it's what I do for a living, or they're my friend and they want blue wallpaper, and really my life's not going to come to an end if it's not yellow wallpaper. Then again, I could either refuse and I can resign, or I can help them do it. And I don't think I'm a traitor because they got blue wallpaper and I wanted yellow. But you can apply this to political views too. Look, I started out life, I grew up in New York. I was a registered Democrat. I'm a registered Republican. But even since being a registered Republican, I have many friends who are registered Democrats, and some who are active in Democrat political activities and who have asked me, they know what I am, have asked me for some help. They're writing something, they're doing something to advance their cause within what they're doing. And they're my friends, I'll help them do it. Or they are, well, I'm not in a position where anyone's paying me to do things like that anymore, but I will help them do it. I'm helping my friends achieve their goals. And as I say, if their goal was to campaign to kill all people over 6 feet, I'd respectfully decline. But I don't have to make everything I do about everything being what I want. And it comes back to this writing. It's not about agreeing or disagreeing, which, by the way, often has nothing to do with agreeing or disagreeing. It just has to do with being able to see what people are trying to say, just being able to see what they're trying to achieve. And I can put myself in their position to help them do that. And I didn't mean to say that what they're trying to write about or achieve has anything to do with politics. It probably doesn't. I'm just saying, if I can do it in politics, I can certainly do it in just normal life events. It has to do with being able to understand what people are saying. And I can understand what people are saying, whether I share that feeling or perspective or not.
So it is a learned skill. It is an instinctual skill. It's interesting, Kenin. Again, there's so much to unpack. I'm just quite fascinated. I've known you for years, but to hear all the aspects of your life, in a sense, is quite fascinating. You obviously fell into the writing part of the books and everything else, but you started out as an attorney. And what attracted you to some of this creative endeavors that you got involved with?
All right. So I was an attorney for the sole purpose at the time of becoming president of CBS. I had no interest in being an attorney. In fact, I only went to law school because I went to Columbia. I grew up middle class in Brooklyn. For my parents to afford even a small contribution to a school of that cost was a lot. I'm going to give you a Chuck Schumer story on that in a second. And my parents made me promise that if they would help pay for an Ivy League school, Columbia or any other similarly expensive school, that I would go to law school. My mother had wanted to go to law school, but didn't. She became a school teacher. Back in the 1950s, not that many women went to law school. I mean, certainly women did, but not that many women. My father had wanted to be an engineer, but couldn't because he had to help support his family. and they just wanted me to be a professional. So I agreed to go to law school. The graduate school that I went to that I really wanted to go to was business school. I got an MBA in marketing, not in finance, because that was more the direction I wanted to go in. Here's the quick, funny Chuck Schumer story. My mother was very friendly with Chuck Schumer's mother. We're from the same general area in Brooklyn. Chuck Schumer's older than me. He had gone to Harvard, and my parents wanted me to go to either the City University of New York or the State University of New York. And I'd been admitted to a couple of Ivy League schools, Harvard, Columbia.
Amazing.
I forget where else. Yale rejected me, but
Those bastards.
Yale didn't like me. I didn't like Yale when I went there for an interview. My answer was, I don't care if you reject me, I reject you. But anyway, they did reject me. It was not about Columbia. It was about an Ivy League school because they were all expensive, and I wanted to go to an Ivy League school. And Chuck Schumer's mother convinced my mother that it was worthwhile paying for me to be able to go to an Ivy League school. So I'm going to tell you, despite everyone else my parents spoke to, but for Chuck Schumer's mother, who of course is a good Democrat Senate leader, but for Chuck Schumer's mother, I probably would have ended up at the State University of New York at, I don't know, Stonington or something.
Yeah.
So I thank Chuck Schumer and I thank his mother.
Your trajectory probably wouldn't have been the same, or as fast as quick as you want it to be.
No, I think that's true. I think even if, and I actually don't believe this is true, I'll be enough of an elitist to say this. I think the education I got at Columbia, and I think the people I interacted with at Columbia and the quality of the classes, I think was higher than it would have been had I gone to the State
100%.
University. And I think, therefore, it did make me better. Those who would find that elitist would say I'd be the exact same person, whichever one I went to.
No, not even close. I had a conversation with a friend of mine. She's a financial analyst, and we just had the same conversation. I said, "What if a kid is born somewhere in a, I'm not going to name any neighborhoods, but
Mhm.
a lower class neighborhood versus a kid who was born in a higher class neighborhood? The same kid, same time, same day. Their life is completely different from the opportunities that they get from this side versus the other side." Mainly because of the things you just said, and you're a middle class person, but some of the parents that don't have the ability to do what some of the parents can do on the upper echelon of things, it's just night and day. So, nobody said life is fair by any means. You got to make your own way, and that's what you've done.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And people come to different conclusions based on what I'm about to say. But it is true that a child, forget the middle class for a second. Well, actually, don't. A child who grows up with two parents, neither of whom went to college, who are hardworking, we're going to say hardworking, maybe even working two jobs, and who live in an impoverished part of a rundown town, but who want their child to succeed, and the child stays in school. I don't want to draw, ridiculous extremes. And a child of exactly identical IQ, whose father is the Secretary of State and whose mother is, I don't know, a partner at the world's biggest law firm, and who interact with the people they interact with growing up and have the conversations they have at the lunch table and dinner table, and who go to Phillips Exeter, which I didn't, I went to James Madison High School, but who go to Phillips Exeter and then go to an Ivy League school. And then in between, when they come home for holiday, are at dinner parties with the
Yeah,
president of wherever. It's not the same thing.
no.
Both of those children may be equally smart. They're not equally knowledgeable. They're not of equal understanding of how things work, and they don't have equal relationships. And you could therefore come to the conclusion, which I don't, that you need to give special advantages to some children over others to go around our meritocracy, affirmative action, all this other stuff. Or you could come to the conclusion life's not entirely fair and let's make the best of it. And let's at least try to create equality of opportunity. So I'm on that side of it. But But I understand how those same facts could lead people to
It's
different
fantastic.
views. But regardless, those facts are those facts. And anyone who thinks those facts are not those facts is quite simply wrong.
Right. No,
And
absolutely.
and I'm not, you know what? There's a saying. Everyone can have their own opinion, but you know what? They actually can't have their own facts.
Mm.
And I'm not trying to be difficult here, but those are the facts. And so I'm somewhere, I'm in the middle, between
I
those two.
agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think you're talking rationale. That's the truth. It's brutally difficult, but it's the truth. And I think this is what I was talking to my friend about, who was disagreeing. I said, nah, that's not true. It doesn't work that way. But Kenan, I want to talk about, I know you're politically involved, and I saw you in some photos with the Prime Minister of Israel, and I thought that was pretty cool what you were doing. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, and just like, and then I want to talk about your personality. So, do you want me to talk about your personality first, or you want me to?
All right. I'll do the usual thing fast. So I was very fortunate it was actually in May. So what, 7 months ago, to be part of a very small group that had the opportunity to go to, originally it was going to be Israel and Saudi Arabia. It ended up being, and I'll tell you why, Israel and the United Arab Emirates. And we met with the highest ranking political people in the two countries. Now, it was originally going to be MBS in Saudi Arabia. And it was originally going to be MBS, and it was going to be the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia. And I'll tell you why it got canceled. So in Israel, in separate meetings, we met with Benjamin Netanyahu. We met with the president of Israel. His name is Herzog. We met with the speaker of the Israeli Knesset. We met with the then foreign minister, who's now the defense minister, other people. We also had the opportunity to go to some forward military bases. And on the day, Israel went back into Rafah. This was in May.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
was a suspension of activities because the Biden administration had asked, demanded, whichever term you prefer, that Israel suspend some of its activities in Rafah. So on the day Israel went into Rafah, we had scheduled a meeting. It was 12 of us. It was Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. It was the National Security Advisor of Israel, their equivalent of Jake Sullivan, who was Biden's National Security Advisor. Uh, it was the Deputy National Security Advisor and one other person. So we were around the conference table. That's Netanyahu has his private office. He opens his door, and that's his conference room. And you've seen that conference room countless times on TV. And I was one person away. It was Netanyahu, it was his national security advisor, and then me. The funny thing is, about partway through the meeting, the national security advisor had to get up and leave. So then it was me next to Netanyahu. Unfortunately, I only have a picture because their PR people gave us the picture of me, the security advisor. I mean, I'm still only one person away, but
you're in the picture.
I don't have the picture of the two of us side by side because that was the second half of the meeting. They didn't release that picture.
Yeah.
And there was a real conversation. Netanyahu spoke to us and we had a conversation. And the reason we didn't go to Saudi Arabia is when Israel went back into Rafah, Saudi Arabia decided this isn't the time to have a U.S. delegation, and they deferred the meeting. It made perfect sense that they didn't want to meet with us that week. But the UAE was willing to meet with us that week, showing how far relations have come between the Abraham Accords, Israel and the UAE, and all of that. And we did go to the UAE, and I didn't send you, but I had pictures of me with similarly high-ranking people there. Because you don't sit around a conference table, the way in Arab countries and in China and some of those countries, you sit in individual seats and they put the chairs into a square or a rectangle. And so I'm
Interesting.
very close to, but I wasn't the person right adjacent to the number one person. So I'm very close to it, but the pictures don't work the same way. So I didn't bother sending that.
And you were there as a consultant? What was your capacity?
I was there as a politically significant American who it was hoped by the people we were meeting with
Got it.
could help communicate both back in America and to some of the other people we were meeting with on that trip. Important information that would help achieve peace.
I got
So
it.
it was known
Amazing.
to the people in Israel that we were going to be going to Arab nations. It was known to the people in the Arab nations that we were coming from Israel. It was known who our connections were, and it was a hope that by being unofficial and by talking to people, we would help improve understanding and communication. So one of the people in a lot of these meetings that I attended was Norm Coleman, the former senator from Minnesota who had gone to my high school. Again, it always comes back. If you look at pictures of Pete Hegseth when he was wandering around the Capitol meeting with different senators, before he hasn't had his confirmation vote yet. He may or may not be confirmed. But he was confirmed by the Senate committee and he met with all the members. Right next to or right behind Pete Hegseth, and every one of those pictures is former Senator Norm Coleman. Because Norm Coleman, who's an attorney and does a variety of things, was obviously part of the effort to obtain Pete Hegseth's confirmation. Now, there was no Donald Trump and there was no Pete Hegseth in May. It was Joe Biden. But I'm just saying to you that these are the type of people, these are the type of connections, we talked earlier about how friendships and acquaintanceships are so important in business. They're important in politics.
Like
They're important in world affairs.
100%.
That's the answer. That's why I was there. And
So impressive. Kenin, I'm going to comment about your personality because I'd love to say that to you. Uh, I think the fact that people think they don't understand that you're joking is because they don't really know you. I think that's really because I watched some of the other podcasts that you were on. By far, you're a lot more character. You show a lot more character on this podcast. You have so much more going on than just facts. And I think that's why. And you come across as a person of authority in many of these other podcasts. And it's kind of like, well, I don't dare to ask, is he really joking? Because you come across so adamantly and so affirmative. What you say is the book in a sense. And I think that's why people may not understand your sense of humor.
you know, that could be true. Now, in some of the podcasts that you've probably looked at or some of the radio broadcasts I'm on, they invite me on to discuss particular subjects where they have a rough idea of what my opinion is. And in many cases, their audiences are probably echo chambers for my opinions. So I'm just talking to people who agree with me anyway. In some cases, I know their podcasts have broader audiences. And maybe on those podcasts, they want me to explain more and be a little more analytic and objective. And on those podcasts, the fact that I don't automatically think that someone who disagrees with me is bad comes across, but maybe in some of the radio shows, it wouldn't come across because for all I know, they wouldn't want me to make that point.
Let me say this to you, my friend. You have come across in this podcast as a very humble, very obviously extremely intelligent, very driven, just a worldly character. And I think a lot of the people that look at my show and on this channel, they are, from all over the world. And I have to say, what you're bringing to the table really opens up the other side of the equation. And I think it's really good for people to hear this. And it's really good for me. I've known you for years, but you and I have never had this length of a conversation about all these subject matters. And I have to say this, I want to bring you back because I'm going to study your books. And I would love to talk about some of the books you did because each of those books are a conversation by itself.
Well, thank you. I don't know, all the conversation by themselves, Trainwreck, which is the Anna Nicole Smith book, maybe was a conversation at that time. Today, Anna Nicole Smith is an interesting historical artifact, a pre-Kardashian. example.
Yeah, but you sent me like 10 books, man. So there's so much you've written.
Yeah, no, and I do enjoy writing. And listen, here's what's true. People on the political side who get so wrapped up in politics, or by the way, get so wrapped up in business, who reach a point where they believe I'm right, you're wrong, or this is what I want, and you're trying to keep me from what's legitimately mine. They're probably not very happy people. They're not very productive people. And it really doesn't make for a very good world. You know what it leads to? It leads to what happened at Christmas time, where now a little bit more from the left this happened, but I'm sure it happened a little bit from the right as well, where people said, I'm disinviting from Christmas dinner. MSNBC host said, you really need to disinvite people who voted for Trump if you're just not yet ready to deal with it. I mean, I just think that's crazy. And I would never, ever disinvite from dinner someone who voted for whoever it is they voted for. I would never tell someone who, and again, ignore Trump, but I would never tell someone who disagrees with me on political issue A, B, or C that they disagree with me, they have to shut up, or I don't want to hear them, or whatever it is that they want. I do come across people who I do believe are factually incorrect in the assumptions they've made that lead them to their political perspective. I have met other people who are factually correct in the assumptions that lead them to their political perspective. We discussed earlier, I think it is factually correct that people who grew up in certain types of households have advantages over those who don't. When people use that to come to a political view that differs from mine, I would never say that they were factually incorrect. I would just say they came to a different perspective. That's why I'm saying it's not one size fits all. It's not always about right and wrong. And people come to views for whatever reason they come to views, and their views may differ. And I may vociferously differ, but it doesn't mean it's about right and wrong.
Yeah,
And often
no,
it's not.
it's not. And but Kenin Spivak, this guy that was on this podcast, I want to be his friend.
Well, sir, I thank you. It's a pleasure to see you. You look great.
Thank
I
you,
like the
man.
hairdo.
I want to be just like you when I grow up.
No, you don't. You're just like you.
Kenin, talk to you
Good.
soon. Thank you for coming on,
Thanks.
brother.
Okay. Bye-bye.